This is the word of the Lord that came to Abram. After these things, the word of the Lord came unto Abram in a vision, saying, Fear not, Abram, I am thy shield and thy exceeding great reward. And Abram said, Lord God, what wilt thou give me? Seeing I go childless, and the steward of my house is this Eliezer of Damascus. For as yet he had not changed his name to Abraham, nor had Isaac. Neither was the promise made to him and his seed. And he looked then at Eliezer and thought, He will be my heir. But God said, Look not at Eliezer, for he shall not be thy heir, but he that shall come forth out of thy own bowels, that is, he shall be hewn out of thy loins. Then he brought him forth abroad, and said, Look now toward heaven, and tell the stars, if thou be able to number them. And he said unto him, So shall thy seed be. Then Abram believed in the Lord, and he counted it to him for righteousness. And he said unto him, I am the Lord that brought thee out of Ur of the Chaldees, to give thee this land to inherit it. And he said, Lord God, whereby shall I know that I shall inherit it? And the Lord said, Take me an heifer of 3 years old, and a she-goat of 3 years old, and a ram of 3 years old, a turtle dove, and a young pigeon. And he took unto him all these, and divided them in the midst, and laid each piece one against another. But the birds divided he not. And when the fowls came down upon the carcasses, Abram drove them away. And when the sun was going down, a deep sleep fell upon Abram, and lo, an horror of great darkness fell upon him. And he said unto him, Know of a surety that thy seed shall be a stranger in a land that is not theirs, and shall serve them. And they shall afflict them 400 years. This is why we celebrate Passover, because God judged the firstborn of Egypt, and also that nation whom they shall serve will I judge. And afterward shall they come out with great substance. And thou shalt go to thy fathers in peace. Thou shalt be buried in a good old age. But in the 4th generation they shall come hither again, for the iniquity of the Amorites is not yet full. Then there came a smoking furnace and a burning lamp that passed between those pieces. In other words, God said, This is my everlasting covenant that will never be broken, and I will be with you and protect you. So after this vision, Abram rejoiced, knowing that his descendants would possess the land even though he would not receive it, and he knew that the Lord was with him. And it says here in verse 21 that in that day the Lord made a covenant with Abram. You see, a covenant is an agreement between two parties. In this case, the Lord made a unilateral covenant. In other words, it was a gift from God to Abram, saying, To your seed have I given this land. From the river of Egypt unto the great river, the river Euphrates. And this was a huge area that even included the land of Israel, Judah, and all the land around there. It's called the Fertile Crescent. And so, God gave Abram this vast territory. Now, the actual giving of the land began with Joshua and Caleb when they entered the land of Canaan. It took about 400 years, like we read here in verse 13, that they were strangers in a foreign land, and then eventually they possessed it after 400 years. But look at all the nations that are mentioned here in verse 22. There's the Kenites, the Kenizzites, the Cadmonites, the Perizzites, the Rephaites, the Canaanites, the Girgashites, and the Jebusites. And notice how many of these names sound similar to the Philistines, the Hittites, the Canaanites, etc. These people groups came from Mesopotamia, from Shem and Ham and Japheth. This is the covenant that God made with Abram, who later became Abraham, the father of the nation of Israel, who had faith in God, believed God's promise, and God counted it to him for righteousness. And thus, we have the gospel in Genesis.